الحمد لله نحمده ونستعينه ونستغفره ونعوذ بالله من شرور أنفسنا ومن سيئات أعمالنا من يهده الله فلا مضل له ومن يضلل فلا هادي له وأشهد أن لا إله إلا الله وحده لا شريك له وأشهد أن محمدا عبده ورسوله صلى الله عليه وعلى آله وأصحابه ومن تبعهم بإحسان إلى يوم الدين أما بعد. So as we continue discussing the book Bulugh al-Maram by Hafiz ibn Hajar al-Asqalani rahimahullah, where he covers or mentioned this book a series of hadith that relates to ahkam al-shar'iyyah. So we've been covering concerning the bab of tahara, and amongst those things that I mentioned here is regarding matters relating to sifat al-wudu, so kayfiyat, how to go about performing al-wudu, and the ahkam that relates to al-wudu. So today we'll be picking up from where we have left off from the last lesson, where we are discussing a previous lesson regarding matters relating to using of the right side or starting with the right side of the body regarding performing acts of wudu and when it is sunnah to do so. So today we'll be discussing further another matter regarding ahkamul wudu, and of those matters regarding wiping over the turban. So wiping over the turban, wal mas'ala imama will be the discussion relating to this particular hadith. So we'll mention hadith and then go through the different things relating to this particular hadith. So the hadith will be read and then we'll have the discussion around this hadith. Bi'awnillah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Tafaddal.
Alhamdulillah wassalatu wassalamu ala rasulillah. Hadith 43, narrated Al-Mughira bin Shu'ba radiallahu anhu. The Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam performed ablution and passed wet hands on his forelock, over the turban and over the two leather socks. Reported by Muslim.
So this hadith is mentioned regarding concerning matters relating to al-wudu, but in particular regarding wiping over the turbans when worn. So he mentioned the hadith of al-Mughira ibn Shu'ba أن النبي عليه السلام توضأ فمسح على ناصيته وعلى إمامة والخفين. So this particular hadith it mentioned regarding concerning, then he mentioned أخرجه المسلم. So the hadith it mentioned the Prophet عليه السلام that he performed al-wudu, tawadda, wa masa ala nasiyatihi, and also that he wiped over his forelock, his forelock, and then he mentioned ala imamati, and also over his turban, and third, khufay, and also wiping over his leather socks. So this hadith, it has several ahkam. We'll be more focusing on the matters regarding wiping over the forelock, nasiyatihi, and also his imama, and the main focus regarding the imama. As for al-khuffayn, then that matter will be discussed later. So the author, Ibn Hajar rahimahullah, in this book, Bulugh al-Maram, that he'll discuss matters relating to wiping over the khuf in as a separate discussion. So that topic will be covered more in detail in upcoming hadith in this chapter. So as for the first thing to be covered is regarding mention matters pertaining to the narrator of the hadith was Al-Mughira ibn Shu'ba. So Mughira ibn Shu'ba, that it is stated regarding this particular Sahabi that as mentioned here, that they state that as for his name is Al-Mughira, so it's Al-Mughira ibn Shu'ba ibn Abi Amir ibn Mas'ud al-Thaqafi. So once again, the name of the Sahabi, Al-Mughira ibn Shu'ba ibn Abi Amir ibn Mas'ud al-Thaqafi. As for his kunya, yukanna, that is also referred to by way of his kunya as Aba Abdullah. So he's referred to as Aba Abdullah, and also Akil Abi Isa. So he's referred to as Abi Abdullah as way of his kunya, or Abu Abdullah, or it is stated that also of his kunya that is mentioned by some is Abu Isa. As for Aslama, as mentioned here, and by the ulama who have mentioned his biography, his tarjuma, they mention Aslama al-Khandaq, that he accepted Islam in the year of the Khandaq, and that year of the Khandaq that I mentioned, that it occurred concerning Am al-Khamis. So Am al-Khamis is the year that he accepted, the 5th year of the Hijrah was when he accepted Islam, who is Mughira ibn Shu'ba radiyallahu anhu. Then I mentioned فَقَدَّمَ الْمُهَاجِرًا, then also he left and he came to Medina as a muhajir. Also وَكَانَ أَوَّلْ غَزْوَةُ, as for the first of the ghazwa, of the battle that he participated in, they mentioned and that it was the Ghazwat al-Hudaybiyah. So the first of the ghazwa, of the battles that he participated in was that of Hudaybiyah. Then also they mentioned that, so as for his duty, that also that he was known Al-Mughira, to be those who were very helpful to the Prophet ﷺ. So he would serve and assist the Prophet in various things. Of those things that he would assist the Prophet in, there's mention regarding al-wudu, so regarding helping the Prophet ﷺ in getting a fetching of the water and assisting the Prophet ﷺ in wudu, and also other matters. As for concerning that he is known to be, one they mention it as that he is known to be very tall in his description or in his physique. Also, it is mentioned that in the time of Omar ibn Khattab, that Umar appointed him as being the wali, regarding being the governor of Basra. So Umar ibn Khattab appointed him as being the governor of Basra. Then also he was removed from this position, and then eventually Umar that also appointed him as being the governor also of Kufa, and also he served there for a while, even up in the time of Uthman ibn Affan. Then he was stepped down from that position. Then eventually again, that in time of Muawiyah ibn Abi Sufyan, so in the leadership of Muawiyah ibn Abi Sufyan, that Muawiyah ibn Abi Sufyan, that he appointed again Al-Mughira as being the governor of Kufa. So he was appointed as being the governor, the Amir over Kufa twice during the reign of Umar ibn Khattab, and again later on in the time of Muawiyah ibn Abi Sufyan, he was appointed again as the Amir, the governor over Al-Kufa, and he died, as the ulama mentioned, Khamsin. So he died the year Khamsin al-Hijri. So the 50th year of the Hijrah was when Al-Mughira ibn Shu'bah that he died. Some mentioned 51, but either around the time concerned the 50th year of the Hijrah was where Mughira ibn Shu'bah died, and also he died in Kufa. So the place of his death was Kufa in the 50th year of the Hijrah. And also that you can find his hadith is mentioned in Kutubu Sitta. So the Kutubu Sitta, his hadith can be found in these books, the main books of hadith: Bukhari, Muslim, At-Tirmidhi, Abu Dawood, Nasa'i, and Ibn Majah, and other books of hadith. So that's concerning something brief regarding this narrator who's Al-Mughira ibn Shu'bah. The next of those things that we'll cover is the takhrij of the hadith. So a general takhrij of the hadith that Ibn Hajar rahimahullah, he mentioned akhrajahu al-Muslim, or akhrajahu Muslim. So this hadith is narrated by Imam Muslim rahimahullah in his Sahih, and the hadith is not found in the Sahih of Imam al-Bukhari. As for what is mentioned regarding concerning further takhrij of the hadith, as mentioned by those who also made takhrij of this book, or editing and checking and verification of the book of Bulugh al-Maram, that Shaykh Halaq, when he mentioned this hadith, he mentioned that the hadith that is mentioned in fi Sahih here in Imam Muslim in his Sahih. Then also he mentioned qultu, and also he added to this akhrajahu. Also the hadith can be found in Abu Dawood, in his Sunan, in At-Tirmidhi, also in his Jama'. And he mentioned that At-Tirmidhi rahimahullah, when he mentioned, he called hadith Hasan al-Sahih. So the hukum that At-Tirmidhi rahimahullah mentioned hadith Hasanun Sahih. Also the hadith can be found in An-Nasa'i. Others who have narrated this, those are amongst Kutubu Sitta. So this hadith amongst Kutubu Sitta, it is found in Imam Muslim in Sahih, in Abu Dawood, Tirmidhi, and also An-Nasa'i. Others outside Kutubu Sitta, he mentioned Abu Awana in his Musnad, Ibn Jarud, Tahawi in his book Shar Mushkil al-Athar, and also Ad-Daraqutni, Bayhaqi, Ahmad in Musnad, and also Tayalisi. So these are other sources that have mentioned this hadith. So other books of hadith, amongst them Abu Awana, Ibn Jarud, Tahawi in his book Shar Ma'ani al-Athar, also Daraqutni, Bayhaqi, Ahmad ibn Hanbal, and also Tayalisi. So these are some of the sources that I've mentioned, or have mentioned this particular hadith. He mentioned here Tanbih al-Akhir, a second of those things that he wished to mention regarding this particular hadith. He mentioned a few tanbihat, a few points regarding this particular hadith, some related to the isnad, but then he mentioned that as he stated concerning Tanbih al-Akhir, another of those tanbih of those things to be mindful of, he mentioned points, he mentioned asl hadith in the Bukhari. That also the asl, the root of this hadith, it can be found also inside Bukhari. ولكن في ذكر المسألة خفين فقط. But the hadith in Sahih Bukhari, it only mention or only states that only state regarding hadith of Mughira, regarding the portion of hadith I mentioned, al-mas'ala khuffain. So as for regarding wiping over the imamah, that portion is not mentioned in Sahih Bukhari, but the portion of this hadith that relates to wiping over the khuffain, wiping over the leather sock, then it is mentioned in Sahih Bukhari. And it's the hadith of Al-Mughira also in Sahih Al-Bukhari. So of those points that he wished to mention regarding this particular hadith. And next of the point are regarding, so that's concerning takhrij of this hadith that is mentioned here. Also you find that Sheikh Mahir Fahal in his checking of the book Bulugh al-Maram, when he stated this hadith, then of the thing that he mentioned that the source of the hadith, he mentioned Rakam Isnain, he mentioned hadith Sahih, he mentioned Akhrajahu Ash-Shafi'i fi Musnadi, that the hadith can be found in the Musnad of Imam Shafi, Ahmed in his Musnad, Imam Muslim in his Sahih, Abu Dawud, Ibn Majah, Tirmidhi, Nasa'i, Ibn Khuzaymah, Ibn Hibban, Bayhaqi. So these are the sources that you have mentioned regarding this particular hadith. So with this hadith, you have mentioned regarding concerning as for the sources that this hadith can be found, or books of hadith, that this hadith can be found, he mentioned Imam Shafi in his book Al-Musnad, that was not mentioned by Hallaq. Ahmed in his Musnad, mentioned also by Hallaq. Musnad, as agreed upon by all. Abu Dawud, also they mentioned Ibn Majah. Ibn Majah was not mentioned by Hallaq in his takhrij of hadith. So he mentioned the hadith Ibn Majah, and he mentioned the hadith is 545. At-Tirmidhi also mentioned by Hallaq, and also he mentioned what was stated by At-Tirmidhi. Also Nasa'i, Ibn Khuzaymah, that was not mentioned previous by Hallaq as additional sources. Also he mentioned Ibn Hibban, so Ibn Hibban, that was not mentioned by Hallaq, but also mentioned here. Bayhaqi, mentioned by Hallaq, and also Hallaq had other sources that were not mentioned here. So also you find Hallaq of sources that was not mentioned here, and also you find with the takhrij of Sheikh Mahir that is mentioned here, that is not mentioned with Hallaq. So both have mentioned sources that they mentioned together, and also sources that each mentioned that was not mentioned by the other. So sources that were mentioned by both together, and sources that were mentioned by one and not the other. So that's concerning takhrij of the hadith in general. So that's concerning the general takhrij of the hadith that is in front of us. They mentioned here Sheikh Abdullah Fawzan in his book Abdullah Fawzan, when he stated this particular hadith, he mentioned as regarding takhrij of the hadith, he mentioned as something also just for regarding concerning something as a point to take into to bear in mind, and a certain area he mentioned فقد وهم Ibn Jawzi فنسب الحديث إلى صحيحين. So he mentioned that Ibn Jawzi, that he have attributed this particular hadith to both Bukhari and Muslim. So Ibn Jawzi have attributed this hadith to both Bukhari and Muslim. فقد أقب Ibn al-Jawzi Ibn Abdul Hadi. So Ibn Abdul Hadi somewhat corrected Ibn Jawzi by stating that this hadith is found in Bukhari and Muslim, and that is not the case. That is not the case. So he wished to clarify. They mentioned وَبَيْنَ أَنَّهُ مِنْ أَفْرَادِ الْمُسْلِمِ. So Ibn Abdul Hadi that corrected Ibn Jawzi that this hadith is actually only found in Sahih Muslim, and the hadith is not mentioned by Bukhari. So a correction on that part regarding the error that was made by Ibn Jawzi when he mentioned this hadith. And also he stated also to confirm this, فقد صرح Ibn Abdul Haq al-Ishbili في جنب نسائهين. So of those who also Ibn Abdul Haq al-Ishbili in his book Al-Jamb Nasa'ihain, and that book is in print, that collected that book, it combined between Bukhari and Muslim, قال أنه من أفراد المسلم. He state that his hadith is of those hadith that is only stated or mentioned by Imam Muslim rahimahullah in his Sahih. And And also فقد ذكر ابن ملكن أن النووي and also Ibn Malakin also said that An-Nawawi rahimahullah also fell into this error. Also they mentioned that An-Nawawi rahimahullah also fell into فذكر Ibn Malakin أن النووي وقع في هذا الوهم, that also that An-Nawawi also fell into this error. So of those who fell into error, as mentioned here, two regarding that they have attributed this hadith to Bukhari and Muslim when the hadith is only mentioned by Imam Muslim rahimahullah. And of those who fell into this error, Ibn Jawzi, and second, An-Nawawi, also as stated by Ibn Malakin alayhim rahmatullah jami'an. So the next of this matter regarding concerning of this hadith, so after regarding takhrij, then we go to concerning, as I mentioned, al-alfaz al-ghariba. So concerning the more difficult words, they mention nasiyatihi. So nasiyah regarding concerning the hair at the front of the head. So we got muqaddim al-ras. So the front, which is the forelock, with the front portion of the head, then the hair there is conferred as nasiyah. So it's as nasiyah, which is at the front of the head. So as for what can be taken from this particular hadith, so as for the ahkam that can be taken from this hadith, that there are several. So as for what is mentioned regarding the ahkam of this hadith, then just a point that is mentioned here by Ibn Uthaymin rahimahullah, when he states this particular hadith, that Ibn Uthaymin rahimahullah, that he mentioned of those things, Jawaz Lubs al-Imama. So from this hadith of Mughira ibn Shu'bah, that he showed the permissibility of the wearing of imama. So the wearing of imama is something which is jaiz, permissible. They mention وَلَبْسَ الْإِمَامَ جَاهِزْ مَا لَمْ يَخَالِفَ الْعَادَةِ. That is something which is permissible to wear the imama as long as the person doesn't go against the customer practice of those people that he live amongst. So if the customer practice amongst the people to wear imama, it is something which is allowed for it to be done. If it is not a customer practice that is widespread amongst the people, that they wear imama, then a person should not per se go against the tradition of those people. Then I mentioned فَإِنْ خَالِفْ الْعَادَةِ سَارَ لِبَاسْ الشُّهْرَةِ. And if the person was to go against the customer practice of those people, what is traditionally worn, that if the person was to wear an imama, and it's not a common practice amongst those people, then I mentioned, then the person Sara libas al-shuhra, then it becomes something considered to be a libas of shuhra, something a person is a garment that's being worn that make the person stand out from amongst the people. So it is something that becomes something which is discouraged to be worn, becomes something which is discouraged to be worn, as it is something that is not of the normal custom or practice of those people. So there's something we want to be mindful of regarding of wearing of certain items or garments were completely considered to be something which is not the norm at all. It's not the norm at all where the people may wear of that particular item. So the person should be mindful of not wearing something that might make them stand out from all, and that becomes fall into, as the Shaykh mentioned, libas al-shuhra. Of those things that the ahkam that can be taken from this hadith, that one, as we mentioned, that so the first of those that are mentioned here in the book that is called Fath al-Alam, in discussing the hadith of Bulugh al-Maram, that he mentioned that al-mas'ala imama. So concerning the hukum, al-mas'ala al-imama, what's the hukum regarding this matter, the permissibility, or is it something which is not allowed? So he mentioned here regarding concerning this matter, ذهب أكثر علماء, that he mentions that ذهب أكثر العلماء, that majority of the ulama, they have taken about the فيما نقل النووي, according to what have been stated or narrated by النووي, خطابي, ماوردي, إلى عدم الإجزاء إذا اقتصر بالمسألة الإمامة, that it is not allowed, not permissible for one to wipe over the imama if the person only restrict to wiping over the imama. So the person only wipes on the imama, the turban, then it is not allowed, according to, as stated there, أكثر ulama. So أكثر, majority of the ulama, are of the position, if the person also restrict himself to wipe over the turban only, then it is something which is not allowed. إلى عدم إجزاء. That is not something which is allowed. And as mentioned here, حكاه ابن منذر عن عروة ابن زبير وشعبي والنخعي والقاسم والمالك وأصحاب الرحي, that those who have taken this view that is not allowed, and they mentioned that based upon that they have come to this conclusion, or this conclusion mentioned وَامْسَحُوا بِرُؤُوسِكُمْ, that you only mentioned the ayah. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala mentioned that the ayah of wudu, وَامْسَحُوا عَلَى وَامْسُوا بِرُؤُوسِكُمْ, that you are to wipe over your heads. So they mentioned that you are to wipe over your heads. So they mentioned that the person, then if the person who wipe only on the imama, then they are not doing what they have been instructed to do, which is to wipe over the head. So they mentioned that the head, the hair is what the person is to wipe over. If the person was to wipe over the imama, the turban only, then the person is not fulfilling what they have been instructed to do. So by this, their wudu is not, doing so is not considered to be valid. The second position of the ulama, ذهب جماعة إلى جواز المسألة إمامة. So the second position of the ulama, that they give a permissibility, it is allowed for one to wipe over the turban, the imamah. واقتصار عليه. And also by this, by extension, they mention واقتصار عليه, that also the person can only wipe over it. The person is allowed, or the person, if he was to wipe over the turban only, then that also this is permissible. This is also permissible. It mentioned وهو مذهب, those who have this view, الثوري, أوزائي, أحمد بن حنبل, أبي ثور, إسحاق, الطبري, وداود الظاهري. So of the ulama who take the position that it is allowed for the person to wipe over the turban, the imama, and also is allowed just to wipe only on the turban. Of those who take the position, the names of the ulama who have taken the position of the Salaf, الثوري, أوزاهي, Ahmed, Abu Thur, Ishaq, Tabari, and Dawood al-Zahiri. So those are the aqwal of the ulama pertaining to this matter. Then I mentioned that Ibn Mundhir rahimahullah قال مما مسح على إمامة, of those who have wiped over the turban, the imama. He mentioned Abu Bakr as-Siddiq, Omar al-Khattab, Anas bin Malik, wa Abu Umamata. So these are from the Sahaba, those who wiped, showing a permissibility and something that was done among the Sahaba. Of those who wiped over the turban, Abu Bakr as-Siddiq, Omar al-Khattab from the Khulafa al-Rashidun, Anas bin Malik, and also Abi Umamata Rata'ala anhum ajma'in. Then I mentioned قد روي ذلك عن سعد بن وقاص. So there's some narration and Sa'd ibn Waqas, Abi Darda, Umar ibn Abdul Aziz, Mahkul, Hassan al-Basri, and Qatada. So of the ulama who give a permissible or of the view that is something which is allowed for the person to wipe over the turban. And the hadith here, that is something which is permissible. The hadith here is something which is permissible. Of those who have explained the book Bulugh al-Maram, one of the Mashaykh from Al-Yemen, in his explanation, that he have mentioned regarding this matter, that he have mentioned, wal-ajab, something which is somewhat striking, في هذه مسألة, in this particular masala, something which is striking in this particular masala, and najid, that we find Jamaahir al-Fuqaha, that majority of the Fuqaha, لا يرون المسألة الإمامة, that majority of the Fuqaha, that they do not give the permissibility or seize the permissibility of wiping over the Imam with the turban. ما ثبوت حديثها, with the authenticity of the hadith relating to this, in the Muslim وغيره, in the Sahih Muslim and others. So in the Sahih Muslim وغيره. So in the Muslim, Imam Muslim وغيره. So and you find the hadith in the Sahih Muslim and his Imam Muslim's collection and also others. But with this you find that majority of all the fuqaha may not take the position that is permissible to do so, even though the hadith are against this. So that's concerning of those matters that he mentioned as something to be mindful of. Then also they mentioned in continuing discussing of this, so that's concerning of those, of what is mentioned regarding the aqwal of the ulama on this matter. And they have other hadith that relates to this matter. They find the hadith of, related by the hadith of Bilal, fi Sahih Muslim, أن النبي عليه السلام مسح على خفين, the Prophet عليه السلام, that he wiped over his خفين, the leather socks, both, والخمار, and also the khimar. So again, and we discuss concerning khimar, what is intended by khimar, meaning al-imama. So what is intended by the khimar, al-imama. So what is intended by the khimar in this hadith is, as the ulama clarify, that it is the imama. So, and other sources regarding this matter, So with this, that of the ulama who hold a position that أنا وقع فيها, that so of the ulama or the person, of the ulama or the person that is allowed to do so both on the imama and also a portion of his head, the forehead. So of the ulama or the person, if he wipes over the imama, then to be wiped over the forehead and also the imama together. And so that's concerning the aqwal of the ulama on this particular topic. The next of those masail, second of those masail that discussed, he mentioned the permissibility. What's the permissibility regarding concerning إذا مسح مقدمة الشعر الرأس مع الإمامة. What's concerning the ruling pertaining to the person, one wiping over the forehead and also the imama. So the muqaddimah, which is the forelock, the forehead, and also the imama. What's the ruling on pertaining to this? Then he mentioned regarding concerning, based upon the hadith of Mughira, that of the ulama, it showed that it's something which is permissible. So the hadith of al-Mughira, it showed the permissibility of the person wiping both on the forehead and also the imama, as mentioned in the hadith of al-Mughira. So they show the permissibility regarding this. So of those who hold that it is something which is permissible, even as we mentioned, that of the ulama hold that the person is not allowed just to wipe over the imama only. He's not allowed to wipe over the imama alone. But of those who take the position that based upon this hadith of Mughira, it is allowed for the person combined between wiping over the forehead and also the forelock and also the imama. And that's a position taken by Ash-Shafi rahimahullah ta'ala. Of the ulama who take the position also that يجب عليه concern a person wipes over the imama, that يجب عليه المس مقدم الرأس. That also the ulama who hold that it is a must that a person, that he must wipe over the forelock of his head and also the imama. So it's a must that a person has to combine between both. So of those who hold that it is permissible jawaz, meaning is allowed, and those who hold that it is a must, and they are the one who take the position that it is not allowed for the person to only wipe over the imama, but a person must also wipe over the forehead, the beginning of the head, with also the imama, the turban, as I mentioned, illa fala yajuz, except if he doesn't do so, then that wiping over the imama, the turban, is not allowed. And that's a view taken by some of the Hanabila. And that's a position taken by some of the Hanabila, that a person, he must wipe both over the forehead and also the turban. And also within the Hanabila, that's a view taken by some of the Hanabila, and also of some of the Hanabila who take the position that is not compulsory. It's not compulsory for a person to wipe over the forehead and also the imama. Amongst the Hanabila, those who take the position that something which is wajib to do so, but it's something which is permissible, something which is permissible to do so. So that's concerned the aqwal of the ulama on this particular matter. So of the ulama who take the position that wiping over the forehead with imama, the forehead in particular, is something which is allowed, jaiz, the view of Imam Shafi. Of the Hanabila, some of the ulama of the Hanabila take the position a person must, is yajib, wajib, that a person must wipe over the forehead and also the imama for that wiping to be considered to be valid. If the person was to, so he must combine between both. And of the Hanabila, a second position of the Hanabila, it is not compulsory. It is something which is not compulsory, that for a person to wipe over that area. So they all at the other view that is something which is mustahab. It is mustahab to do so, but not to the degree of it being said to be wajib. And as a view taken by some of the Hanabila. And it is stated here that Ibn Uthaymeen rahimahullah is more inclined towards the view that is something which is mustahab, that the person wiping off the forehead or the fola, it is something which is mustahab to do so, not the entire thing, or not wajib. The third of those masail, all of those masail mentioned that regarding wiping over the turban, that is the person also must include wiping over the ears. So wiping over the turban, does also the person after wiping over the turban, then he will go to wipe over his ears as normally done when wipe over the head. So as I mentioned, mas al-udhanayn ma imama. So what's the ruling on wiping both ears while upon wiping the turban? Ibn Qudam rahimahullah in his book Al-Mughni, he mentioned la khilaf, that there is no difference fi anna al-udhanayn that wiping, that as for both ears, la yajib masahuma, that it is not compulsory to wipe both the ears. لأنه لم ينقل ذلك, because there's nothing that have been mentioned regarding this. So there's nothing that has been narrated regarding this. وليس من الرأس, and also both, and that it is not from the ras, is not from the head. إلا على وجه تتبع, except taba, except that it follows the head, except it follows the head. So Ibn Qudam rahimahullah, he mentioned la khilaf, that there is no difference في أن الأذنين لا يجب مسحهما. So he mentioned it is not compulsory that the person is not compulsory to wipe them, as there is nothing that has been narrated on this matter. So that's what is stated by Ibn Qudam rahimahullah. Then the author of this book that he had mentioned, قلت, in somewhat commenting and what had been stated by Ibn Qudam, mentioned قلت نفي Ibn Qudama, by Ibn Qudam rahimahullah, saying that there is nothing that had been mentioned on this matter regarding it being wujub, being wajib, لا ينفي المشروعيات. It doesn't negate that this being something which is still permissible. So even though Ibn Qudam rahimahullah mentioned it is nothing that is not yajib, not compulsory in doing so, but it still does not negate that it's not something which is allowed, permissible to be done, or something which is allowed within the Sharia. That I mention والاستحباب, فالاستحباب والاستحباب, it is something which is mustahab, preferred to be done. وتنبه, so something to be mindful of. ومسحهما, and wiping both على الإمامة mustahab, and wiping them alongside with the turban is something which is mustahab. So it is something that is mustahab, that one wipe along with the turban also the ears. Wiping the ears also along with the turban is something which is mustahab. They mention why? لعموم أدلة في مس الأذنين, based upon the general evidence of wiping over both ears and wiping on both ears. So it's still to be done, and it's still mustahab for one to wipe on the ears after wiping over the imamah, the turban. So there's not something that the person should not do, but rather it is something to be done. But by way of, it is something which is mustahab, not per se wajib to be done. But Ibn Qudam rahimahullah kind of somewhat negate that it is something which is wajib, which does not per se in totality negate that is something which is still mashru', permissible, and to the degree of being mustahab, still recommended to be done. So that's concerning that particular discussion of those masail that is covered concerning al-yashtarit libasuha ala tahara. Of those matters discussed between the fuqaha in wearing the turban, is it also conditional that a person must be in a state of tahara? So after the person be given allowance to wipe over the turban, is it also is it conditional, a prerequisite, that a person must be in a state of tahara from previous for him to be given this allowance? Ash-Shawkani rahimahullah, as in the book Nail Awtar, he mentioned, قال Abu Thur, that it is stated, and Abu Thur says, لا يمس على الإمامة والخمار إلا لمن لبسهما على طهارة قياسا على الخفين. So Ibn Abu Thawr rahimahullah, he mentioned that it is the meaning لا يمسح, it is not allowed for one to wipe over the imam the turban or the khimar, the head cover, illa except liman, except for the one labasahuma, except for the one who have wiped over both ala tahara, except that they have wiped previously, that they are already in a state of tahara, except that they are previously in a state of tahara. قياسا على خفين, based upon qiyas, an analogy based upon the khuffain. So you have made an analogy based upon the khuffain, the leather socks, that for the person is allowed to wipe over them, he must have already previously put them on while in a state of tahara. So when a person put on the khimar or the turban, he must be in a state of tahara for him to give him the allowance, the permissibility to wipe over them after which. That's the view taken by Abu Thawr. That's the view taken by Abu Thawr. They mention وَلَمْ يَشْتَرِطْ ذَلِكَ الْبَاقُونَ, mentions that as for the other of the ulama, they do not per se put this as a requirement. So the majority of the ulama, they do not put as a requirement that the person to be allowed to wipe over the turban, that you have to previously be in a state of tahara. That is not a condition stated by the many of the ulama. But as for Abu Thawr, then that's the view that he has taken, mentioned وَهَذَا قَوْلُ الظَّاهِرِيَّ أَيْضًا, and also it's a position taken by the Zahiriyya. So that's concerning this matter. Then the final hukum, and it mentions there's nothing that has been narrated to the ulama as we make a distinction regarding concerning the ahkam that relates to al-khuf as its own rules and conditions. Also al-imama as its own rules and conditions, and also so these things have their own condition. So not all the conditions that relates to the khuf and the imama, they are the same. So they share wiping, but as for the rules attached to this, then they differ on those matters. So this qiyas is not taken by majority of ulama. This qiyas that is mentioned by Abu Thawr as a condition, that it is not accepted and taken by majority of the ulama. So the qawl al-raji' is أنه لا يشترط. That's the qawl al-raji', that is something which is not a requirement. Is not a requirement. So Ibn Hazm rahimahullah, when he challenged this matter or discussed this matter, he mentioned regarding concerning that Ibn Hazm rahimahullah concerning قال al-qiyas batil, that is type of qiyas that is made by Abu Thawr, that is something which is batil. وليس هنا علة جامع, that there is no علة جامع بين الحكم. So there is no علة جامع that بين, that's between المس على الإمامة, that relates to wiping over the turban, والخمار, and also the head cover, والمس على خفين. So there's no in this case that this illah that is being mentioned, that it does not fit all those things that are being covered regarding the turban, the khimar, and also wiping over the khuffain, the leather socks. So by this, that the Prophet ﷺ has stated different rules regarding each. He has stated different ahkam regarding each. So based upon that concern, the qawl al-raji' is that the qawl of those who do not stipulate that is conditional, that a person must previously be in tahara for him to wipe over the turban. The fifth of those matters that are covered regarding imama, al-mas'ala al-imama, that I mentioned, at-tawqit. Is there a time limit within which the person is allowed to wipe over the imama? So wiping over the imama, is there a time limit, time restriction, or is there not? Ash-Shawkani rahimahullah also mentioned in his book An-Nil Awtar, that he mentioned وَكَذَلِكَ اِقْتَلَفُوا فِي التَّوْقِيت. That is also a difference between the ulama regarding at-tawqit. Is there a time factor that relates to wiping over the imama, the turban? قال Abu Thawr, أيضا of the view taken by Abu Thawr, أن وقته كوقت المس على خفيه. So Abu Thawr, that also he takes the position that the time limits for wiping over the turban is the same time limits that is given for wiping over the khuffain, which is, according to his view, would mean that for you are allowed a 24-hour period, day and a night, for wiping over the turban, just as wiping over the khuf for the person who is a muqim, the person who is residential, is allowed 24 hours to do so. And as for the person of musafir, he has 3 days. That's according to what is can be taken and extracted from the view of Abu Thawr. He mentioned, Inna waqtuhu, as for his timing, كوقت المس على خفين. So that's concerned the view of Abu Thawr رحمه الله تعالى. قد بدأ mention قد روي مثل ذلك عن عمر, and also it has been narrated, been transmitted somewhat, that needs to be looked into regarding Ibn Umar, regarding Umar ibn Khattab, and that needs to be looked into. Mentioned والباقون, mean concerning the rest of the ulama, the remaining ulama, lam yuwaqitu, do not stipulate a time restriction for wiping over the turban. They do not put a time restriction regarding wiping over the turban, contrary to what is mentioned in Abu Thawr and ascribed to Umar. And then he mentioned here that أما الأثر عمر الخطاب فقد قال ابن حزم في المحلى أنه ثابت عنه وأنه يقول بالتوقيت. That Ibn Hazm rahimahullah mentioned in his book Al-Muhalla that the Athar and Ibn Umar and Umar ibn Khattab, that's mentioned innahu thabit, that is authenticated upon Umar regarding setting a time restriction. But the Jumhur of the ulama are contrary to this. Then I mentioned فقد وافق Abu Thawr على ذلك جماعة من الحنابلة, and also find a group, some of the ulama of the Hanabila, also they agree with the position taken by Abu Thawr, that wiping over the imama of some time limits. And they mentioned that of the time with regard to that of the khuffain, wiping over the khuffain according to them. Then they mentioned that as for the conclusion, was sahih adam al-tawqit. So what is the more correct view regarding time restriction? Is there time limits in wiping over the turban? They mentioned as sahih adam al-tawqit, that there is no time restriction or time limits regarding wiping over the turban. They mention لأن النبي عليه السلام مسح على إمامة ولم يوثق ذلك بحد. So the Prophet Islam كمس على خفين. The Prophet Islam regarding he had wiped over his imama and didn't per se stipulate any time restriction, contrary to that of the khuf where he did put in place some time restrictions. So in this case at Tarq, the Prophet Islam left, did not put any time restriction, so it is left as such without putting any time restriction. And qiyas in this case is not qiyas is considered to be that not a valid qiyas on this matter. And even though Ibn Hazm rahimahullah, that of the view that also there is no time restrictions, Ibn Hazm al-Zahiri, that he puts in the discussion this matter that there is no time restriction this matter on this matter. So that's concerning that particular discussion on this matter. And Ibn Taymiyyah rahimahullah of the contemporaries who also of that view, there is no time restriction. So overall, there is no time set regarding wiping over the imama, the turban. Also, other matters that are covered regarding this particular matter of the ulama who put certain type of condition regarding of what type of turban is allowed for a person to wipe over. So of the ulama of the Hanabila, they put certain guidelines or restriction regarding muhannaka, that has to be something that is tied, fully tied to the head, and also it goes under the chin, and also it have these ends to it. So they put certain kind of condition that are placed by the Hanabila, as I mentioned, after the way it was worn in the time of the Prophet ﷺ. So they put those conditions. So the one that does not fulfill muhannaka, that is fully cover the head, and also it runs underneath, and as these ends, the end run underneath the person's chin, then that's the condition. They put those as condition according to them. Also of those things that are discussed concerning that the matter, if the nazal imama, the person was to wipe over it, after wiping he was to remove it, then is the person wudu still valid? So the person, upon performing wudu, he wiped over the imamah, then later on he removes this. Then does this removal of the imamah after wiping over it, does this negate the person, invalid the person's tahara? On this matter, ذهب أحمد بن حنبل رحمه الله إلى أنه ينقض wudu. That Ahmad bin Hanbal rahimahullah, he mentioned that if the person wants to do so, then this would invalid the person's wudu. So removing of the imamah after wiping over it, then this will negate the person's tahara, negate the person's wudu. Ibn Hazm rahimahullah is contrary to this. Ibn Hazm rahimahullah mentioned that أنه لا ينقض الوضوء. It does not negate the person's wudu. It does not negate the person's wudu. And that's called to mention وهو صحيح. That is the more valid opinion. And that will be اختاره Shaykh al-Islam Ibn Taymiyyah rahimahullah ta'ala. And Ibn Hazm rahimahullah mentioned وقول طائفة من السلف. That is the qawl that is taken by a group among the Salaf. So on that matter, that you find that a discussion between the ulama, Ahmad bin Hanbal hold that take the position the person was to perform wudu and he wiped over his imamah. If he was to remove this imamah after wiping over it, then his wudu is considered to be nullified. Ibn Hazm and others the ulama, Ibn Taymiyyah, take the position that that's if the person was to remove his imamah after wiping over it, his wudu is still valid. His wudu is still valid. And also that's the position that is taken by Shaykh Mu'bid ibn Hadi al-Wadi rahimahullah, Ibn Thaymeen rahimahullah, that as there's no evidence that states that removing the imamah nullifies one wudu. There's no evidence regarding this particular matter. The next of those matter will be extension regarding al-khimar, mas'al al-khimar. So al-khimar, they'll clarify regarding concerning in the case of a man wearing some form of headgear, so a head cover. Now sometimes referred to as al-gutra, like in some places referred as al-gutra, that is a head cover that is worn by a male, ذهب ibn Hazm regarding al-khimar. So we mentioned the hadith of Bilal that it states before regarding that the hadith of al-Bilal, where it mentioned أن النبي عليه السلام مسح على خفين والخمار. So the hadith in the hadith of Bilal in the Muslim. So al-khimar in this case, what the ulama have clarified regarding concerning that, as mentioned by in Nihaya, by Ibn Asir mentioned, al-khimar arada bihi al-imama. So Ibn Asir in his book Al-Nihaya, he mentioned al-khimar arada bihi al-imama. So what is meant by khimar, what is intended is al-imama. So by this, in this discussion regarding wiping over the khimar, this headgear, this head cover, then it mentions that ذهب Ibn Hazm wa Abu Thawr ila jawaz al-mas'ali, that Ibn Hazm al-Zahiri, Abu Thawr ila jawaz al-mas'ali, regarding concerning the permissibility of wiping over the khimar. And they said the hadith of Bilal, they use the hadith of Bilal, that the hadith of Bilal radiallahu anhu, that showed the permissible wiping over, said that khimar will be in a form of a gutra that is worn on in today's time. The second view of the ulama, ذهب عامة أهل العلم, that majority, the bulk of the ulama, إلى أدم المسألة خمار, that they take the position that it is not allowed, not permissible for a person to wipe over the khimar, because it's not easy to be removed. So regarding wearing of the khimar for the male, the head cover, head dress, head gear for the men, then it is not allowed. So what we call the gutra today, then this is not allowed. It is not allowed, and the view taken by majority of the ulama mentioned. There is then وذلك لأن الرخصة جاءت بالإمامة. Why I said that the rukhsa, that allowance is given for the imamah. So, and I mentioned ولا يتجاوزها إلا بدليل, and a person is not to extend this except the person not allowed to include anything else except that there's a dalil to prove so. So based upon this, and I mentioned that as for what is mentioned by the hadith of Bilal, as we mentioned that what is mentioned by khimar, what is intended is imama. What is intended in the hadith of Bilal, the word khimar being used but what actually meant is what is meant is the imama. So the ulama of the Sharh Gharib al-Hadith, of them Ibn Azir in his book Al-Nihaya, that they mentioned that al-khimar arada bihi al-imama. Yes, that is used to yagati ar-ras. That's something that's used to cover the head. And also they prove the point, said the hadith of Bilal, also narrated by Al-Bayhaqi in his As-Sunan. In his As-Sunan, Bayhaqi rahimahullah mentioned, bi-isnadin sahih bilaf. So also this hadith that is narrated by Bilal in the Sahih Muslim, that also the hadith has been narrated by Bayhaqi rahimahullah, where he mentioned that the same hadith, he mentioned, وَمَسَحْ ala khuffain, that he, the Prophet ﷺ, wiped on his khuffain, the leather socks, both leather socks, wal imama. So the word that had been substituted, the word khimar, now being substituted to the word imama. So they mentioned that, and there's some similar hadith, that so the same hadith, so it can somewhat remove that ishkal as to what is intended by khimar. So the hadith of Bayhaqi, then it can clarify that what is intended by khimar is al-imama. Wallahu ta'ala alam. The next of those things that are now discussed regarding head cover for men, regarding what we refer to as qansalawa or kalansiwa, that is this type of thing that is worn. They call it kufi, or these type of caps that are worn. So these type of caps that are worn, referred to as kufi and the likes, regarding concern that it is mentioned that is it also allowed for the person to wipe over these type of things. So whatever type, so these type of hats that are worn over the head, is allowed for one to wipe over them. Ibn Mundir rahimahullah qala in the book Al-Awsat, كان الأوزاعي وسعيد ابن أبي العزيز والمالك والشافعي والنعمان والإسحاق وكل ما نحفظ عنهم, and all that we know of من أهل العلم, that we can account for from amongst the people of ilm, لا يرون ذلك, that they do not give permissibility for this. So again, Ibn Mundir rahimahullah in the book Al-Awsat قال كان أوزاعي وسعيد ابن أبي العزيز مالك شافعي النعمان إسحاق وكل ما نحفظ عنه, and all of those that we can account for من أهل العلم, from the people of knowledge, لا يرون ذلك, that they do not give permissible to this. Then I mentioned for Nakhl ibn Mundhir and Anas أنه, that also they mentioned that in Anas that he gives some permissibility. So you have, as also it is mentioned, but I mentioned that it is narrated on Anas bin Malik that he gives some permissibility. But I mentioned ولكن في إسناده ضعف, but also the isnad regarding Anas, that the isnad it is weak. So Anas, that isnad that have been mentioned regarding Anas bin Malik, given permissibility, the isnad that is something which is weak. ولكن فقد صح عن أبي موسى الأشعري, but rather it had been authenticated in Abu Musa al-Ash'ari, وقال بي Abu Thor, and Abu Thor, that they give some permissibility. So they give some permissibility, and also that is mentioned at Ibn Taymiyyah, that also gives some permissibility. So you find that a minority, so in the time of Ibn Mundhir mentioned from what he knows of the ulama of that era, that no one gave permissibility, but then others have mentioned that Abu Musa al-Ash'ari, who was a Sahabi, have given some permissibility, and also Abu Thor, and also Ibn Hazm al-Zahiri, also Shaykh al-Islam Ibn Taymiyyah in his book Ikhtiyarat, that have given some permissibility. So it shows that a minority, a very small minority, have given a permissibility, but majority, the bulk of the ulama, give put the point that it is not something that's permissible. And as for the qawl al-rajih, qawl al-jumhur of the ulama. So in reality, the qawl of jumhur of the ulama that takes the position that it is not allowed for the person to wipe over concerning these type of head covers regarding caps that are worn over the head, that it is not allowed. So that's concerning the correct view, as it's easy to be removed. It's easy to be removed and to be placed on to the head. As for the imama, it is tied to the head and also strung around the neck and the shoulders, so more difficult to be removed. And also you have nas text, clear text regarding the permissibility of the imama. So based upon this, that it is not allowed regarding these these caps that are head caps, but for the imama it is allowed. The next of those matters to be the final, or to be the finality and the final of these masail regarding concern al-mas al-mar'a ala khimariha. That the premise is it, what's the ruling pertaining to a female wiping over her khimar. So the khimar, that is where the hijab is referred to as at times, that a female wearing this hijab over her head, that is allowed for her to wipe over this. On this matter, that it is mentioned, ذهب خلاف between the ulama, of the ulama, which is jumhur of the ulama, ذهب جمهور العلماء إلى أن المرأة لا تمسح على خمارها. That jumhur of the ulama take the position that it is not allowed for a female, a woman, to wipe over a khimar. So over her head cover, she is not allowed to wipe over this. And I mentioned وقول Imam Malik. So of those of jumhur, amongst them Imam Malik, والأوزائي, والشافعي, والرواية عن Imam Ahmed, and a riwayat and narration Imam Ahmed, وقال به نافع, نخي, عطاء, عبد الرحمن ibn Abi Layla, وغيرهم. So you find that of the ulama who forms a part of jumhur amongst those that I mentioned, that takes the position that is not allowed for a female to wipe over a khimar. Of those, Imam Malik, Awzahi, Imam Shafi, Imam Ahmed, as one riwayah, one narration, and Nafi', Nakhay, Ata, Abdul Rahman, Ibn Abi Layla, and others. The second position that on this matter, that they state, ذهب أحمد بن حنبل في الرواية. So Ahmad ibn Hanbal, as another narration of Ahmad ibn Hanbal, وقول Ibn Hazm, and also position taken by Ibn Hazm, إلى أنها تمسى, that she's allowed to wipe over her khimar. So the second position of the ulama is that is allowed for a female to wipe over khimar. So she's covered of her head cover, her head dress, that she's allowed to wipe over this. That's the view that is taken by, as mentioned, riwayat, one narration Ahmad ibn Hanbal, is the qawl of Ibn Hazm al-Zahiri, also Mathab Hassan, and also been authenticated an Salama, as narrated by Ibn Abi Shayba in his book Al-Musannaf. So in the Musannaf Ibn Abi Shayba, that's been narrated an Salama, where it mentioned بإسناد حسن أنها كانت تمسح على خمارها, that Salama, a Sahabi, that she used to wipe over her khimar. So this that's concerning those of the aqwal of the ulama on this matter. As for the conclusion regarding those who say it is not allowed, that's the jumhur of the ulama, and some of the ulama and others of the ulama who take the position that it's allowed, what's the final conclusion? The author of this book mentioned, قال الراجع والله أعلم أن المرأة إن شق عليها نزأة, that لبرد أو ثبوت لثبوت الخمار. That he mentioned that overall أنها أن تمسى, that he mentioned that overall we consider the female, that it is, if she find it going to be difficult for her to remove her khimar because of how it is tight, or it is worn, or because of the weather, or maybe the circumstance that she's in an area which is public and she has to make wudu, and she cannot remove her khimar, or she's going to expose her hair, then those circumstances we find it difficulties, then I mentioned that laha and tamsa. In those circumstances, then she's allowed to wipe over her khimar. So she's in a situation where it becomes difficult to remove yashaq, nas'a, it becomes difficult for her to remove her khimar based upon she may be in public but still perform wudu, and if she was or because of weather condition, or the way it is tied and difficult, she's outdoors, then I mentioned that she's allowed to do so. She's allowed to do so. So that's concerning that of and that's concerning the view of Ibn Taymiyyah rahimahullah, that in those circumstances, so she's in her home, then she's in a masjid, she should remove her khimar and wipe over her head, but she's in public or find a situation is very difficult, then she's allowed to wipe over her khimar. She's allowed to wipe over her khimar. Then I mentioned also Ibn Taymiyyah rahimahullah mentioned قال وعلى كل حال, on all circumstances إذا كان هناك مشقة. So Ibn Taymiyyah rahimahullah said that if there's situation of difficulties, then I mentioned إما لبرود الجو, because of the weather, أو لمشقة النز, and other reasons that he mentioned that is allowed. I mentioned تسامى في مثل هذا لا بأس به. So in those cases, somewhat she's given some allowance for her to wipe over her khimar. She's allowed to wipe over her khimar because of the circumstance. So that inshallah ta'ala, it covers regarding of those masail, of those things that is mentioned by Ash-Shawkani and others regarding, as mentioned by others, is the person to wipe once. So wiping over the imama, the khimar, then the person do so once. So not to be wiped twice or 3 times, but for it to be wiped only once. So those are the masail that relates to al-imama, are some of the masail that relates to al-imama. So that inshallah ta'ala, that this hadith that we have mentioned today, the hadith of Al-Mughira ibn Shu'bah, so we have covered regarding al-takhrij, we have mentioned regarding al-tarjuma of Al-Mughira ibn Shu'bah. Also we discussed concerning the masail that relates to this matter, and also of those things of the benefit of the hadith, that it shows regard that Islam is not to put difficulty on the servants. So with Islam and acts of ibadah and counsel acts, that Islam is not to put mashaqqa, put difficulty upon the people. So in certain cases where it may be difficult, that may be difficult, then Islam giving certain leeway on those matters. So in those cases, these are one of those cases concerning the leniency of Islam, where not to put difficulties upon the worshippers. So it's for us. So of these ahkam, we clarify regarding those cases where there's some leniency and how we can go about applying them in the correct manner. So they mentioned that the hadith, it relates to al-imama, also by extension al-khimar worn by female in times of mushaqqa, where time of difficulties that you might find yourself in. As for regarding the head caps or hoodies that are sometimes worn, then the person does not wipe over those things. One, or they said the gutra that is worn, then also it is not, one do not wipe over those. So no qiyas of those things with that of the imamah, the turban. So that inshallah ta'ala we have covered of those points that relate to this particular hadith. So the hadith of the focus of this hadith is the cover regarding some of the ahkam that relates to al-imamah. The ahkam relating to al-imamah, wearing of the turban. So that inshallah ta'ala will end this matter. And also just something to be mindful, as the Shaykh mentioned, Ibn Taymiyyah, that is wearing of the imamah, the turban, then that goes back to the custom of the people of that balad. So it goes back to the custom of the people of that particular place. So if that custom or practice that it is worn amongst the people, then the person wearing it, then that's not a problem. And it's allowed to be worn. If it's in a place where it is not a custom, it's a practice amongst the people that it is worn, then one should not go against that. And by wearing it, where one would stand out and seen as libas al-shuhra. So that's of those things to take into account of not wearing of things that will be deemed as libas al-shuhra, as that contradicts what is expected from the Muslim. With that, inshallah ta'ala, we have ended this particular hadith and those masail that relates to this particular hadith of imama. With that, inshallah ta'ala, will end. وبالله تعالى توفيق وهذه السبيل والآخرة والحمد لله. السلام عليكم ورحمة الله وبركاته.